Welcome back to the podcast. This week, we're sharing one of my favourite episodes so far, part of our new series of recap episodes. While we're busy producing new content for the podcast, YouTube, and our brand new Patreon channel. That's right, Connect, Curate, Create is now on Patreon. It's a dedicated space to learn, share, and grow together. And here's why we built it. Do you feel like your art is being seen by the right people? Are you getting the kind of feedback that actually helps you grow? Do you have a space where you can learn with other artists who really get what you're doing? If you answered no to any of these questions, Connect, Curate, Create is here for you. Our Patreon community gets exclusive and early access to content, behind the scenes videos, key takeaways from episodes and events, access to live discussions with our guests, and so much more. So, if you're ready to grow your creative practice with the support of a collaborative learning community, click the Patreon link in the show notes and join us today. Now, let's get into another brilliant episode, packed with ideas and inspiration for your own creative journey. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here in Hobart again, and in an absolutely delightful studio with Maggie Jeffries, an emerging artist. Maggie, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Cool. Welcome. We only met this week.
Yes, on Tuesday.
And it's Friday now, yeah. And it's like we just shared what we did, and I thought, oh wow, it would be great if Maggie wanted to come on the podcast, and you said, oh, can I come?
Yes, like straight away. Yeah. I was like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was great. So and we met through Second Echo Ensemble, based here in Hobart. I've just been spending 3 days with everyone there and having the best time of my life.
A whirlwind of 3 days. Yeah, I reckon.
Did so much, and so much we can't talk about. We made a film, and we can't that's still coming. There was play rehearsals that we can't talk about yet. But oh wow, check out Second Echo Ensemble.
Definitely, yeah. There's big stuff coming. Yeah. Second Echo. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. So what's the work that you do there, Maggie? We perhaps if we talk about that first, because I just got your passion for your work there, and then we can come back to everything we're surrounded here, this beautiful artwork of yours, because so you paint with oils, but that's a performing arts organisation. So what's the connection?
Yeah, part of my practice kind of splits in two. I've got my painting practice, and then my practice working as an artist support and facilitating the work of artists with all abilities. And so I've been really interested in that sort of part of my practice, like sort of finding work in that part of my practice, because it has been volunteer for quite a long time, but I love it, so it's worth it. But so I sort of found Second Echo through, there's sort of like the timeline of me discovering that I wanted to be part of that world, and particularly that part of Tasmanian contemporary art practice. Then found Second Echo through Ability to Create, which is the Hobart City Council exhibition they put on every 2 years now, but it was every year, for artists with all abilities. So I saw a performance from Second Echo Ensemble in that sort of exhibition, and I was on King Island at the time doing a residency, and I asked my sister to go along and FaceTime the whole thing. So I was in the studio on King Island, in the corner of the studio with the best reception, and then watching this performance of Second Echo Ensemble and just bawling my eyes out because it was so beautiful. Yeah. And then I sort of had them sort of in the corner of my eye waiting for a time that I could try to be involved. And so I just contacted them and was like, can I come in and volunteer, or whatever that looks like? And then that sort of developed into a small first project with one of the artists, and then moving on to say sort of artist support, which is what I do now. So my role there is to support the artists in whatever production performance or project we're working on, and sort of make sure they have everything they need. Any questions they have, if they're asking for support, we can do that, whatever that looks like, and also facilitate their storytelling. So I love it. It's the best job in the world.
I could see that just spending the last few days with you. And yesterday you weren't in, but you came in for band in the afternoon, and you came in early.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I mean, you know someone loves their work when they come in early to work.
Yeah, I love coming in for that sort of all those really beautiful conversations that happen, sort of those casual conversations before we start working. I sort of, in my head, realise, I sort of think about it and I'm like, when is too early to go to work? Like, when is the earliest I can go where I'm not in the way? So then I sort of time it like that. I love being there, and I feel a real sort of pull towards that space, and the way that they sort of run their programs is a big part of what I'd like my research to be, moving towards a PhD. So I'm learning so much just getting to be in the space. So I think I probably annoy everyone a little bit by being overly thankful. I'm sort of like, thank you so much for allowing me to come in and be here. And they're like, yeah, like you're part of the team now. You don't have to keep saying thank you. But I'm like, I feel very lucky.
Yeah.
So I love it. It's really fun, and really good example of a studio space that's doing that kind of work really, really well. Like, they're setting the standard for a lot of other places. So love to be part of that as well.
Yes. Yeah. Look, hopefully I'll talk to Kelly and see if we can find a way to do some work, I mean, there's enough going on to showcase and promote Second Echo, and a lot of people here know about it, but to share with the wider world, just what a wonderful thing. Yeah, my first experience was at TEDx earlier this year, and Luke John doing the Bond.
Yeah.
And wow, I wasn't expecting it. So it came out of nowhere, and look, I'm incredibly grateful to, like you, I thank you all the time, because it's just, you're taking so much in. Yeah, working with people of all abilities, and and they are artists.
Yep.
That's the key.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's get back to you, Maggie. I mean, you've given us a little teaser there, alluding to the end of the podcast, because we'll get to perhaps talking about the future, and you'd mentioned you'd like to work on a PhD, but you have a painting practice. Where did it all begin?
How far back do you want me to go?
That is entirely up to you.
Well, briefly, my mum sort of started taking me to art classes when I was 7. And so I was with Brian Chandler School of Art from 7 to 16, I think. So it was sort of that thing that, my parents really wanted me to have something outside of school to focus on. Wasn't very into sport, and my sister was doing drama classes, and that was her thing. Drama classes probably would have helped me now in my role at Second Echo. But we were sort of looking for my hook as something that I could sort of sink my teeth into as a kid and have my own thing. I started going to art classes, and then that, all the way through school. And then I started I did a arts degree and fine arts degree, so combined double degree for my bachelor's degree, majoring in psychology and painting.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was interesting. They wouldn't let me do the Bachelor of Behavioural Science and the fine arts degree, which is what I wanted. I wanted a psych degree and a fine arts degree majoring in painting. But they wouldn't let that be a double degree, so it had to be under arts. So did everything that was in a behavioural science degree, but under arts. Which I was always sort of a bit like, why can't I do both at the same time? But, different schools and that kind of thing. But I sort of did that for it took me about 4.5 years to do that, which was great. And I was sort of wanting to go in a counsellor art therapy direction.
I was going to ask you what the link with psychology is.
Yeah, I was really interested in art therapy, and having known how much my art practice had helped my own mental health, I was like, this is a space that I'd like to work in and research in as well. And I also was saying that I was like, if I don't get to be an artist and it doesn't work out, I can have a career in psychology or counselling or something like that. And my parents were like, you don't need a fallback, just be an artist. They were like, we support you to be an artist.
That's
like,
so cool.
Which was amazing.
Are your parents in the arts?
My dad is an artist, but in his own sort of practice. But yeah, he's very creative and does a lot of sort of model making and woodwork and that kind of stuff. And I would say my mum is very creative, but she's a nurse, and then my stepdad's a nurse as well. So we have, my dad was also he's retired now, but was a teacher. So very creative family, but no one had gone and done I'm going to be an artist and try and live off that kind of thing. So I was a bit nervous about that, and also wanted to be a little bit more, I was like, I'm going to be smart about it. I'm going to do enough stuff that I'll find something somewhere that will be my place. And then towards the end of my degrees, I just wanted to be out of Tasmania for a second, and I was like, I need to leave. So I started researching and found Creative Growth in Oakland, California.
Right.
Yeah, and I emailed them, very long email, being like, I love what you guys are doing. So it's a studio working with, at the time it was over 170 artists with disabilities in California. Yeah, and amazing work. Like, they've huge studio, been around for a really long time, and a gallery attached to the studio space. And so I emailed them and I was like, I'm really excited. I'm doing a degree in psychology and fine arts, and I'd really love to come over and volunteer. And I told them about myself and what I was doing as an artist, and they wasn't quite calling myself an artist. No, I was maybe calling myself an artist then, I'm not sure. But then they offered me a fellowship for a month to work in the studio. So that was great, and I spent all my savings and just went to California for a month.
Awesome.
And then I went to this studio, and I was in the studio for like half an hour, and I was like, I just want to do this forever. This is my career. I want to do it for the rest of my life. And I remember telling you that on Tuesday when I was babbling away, telling you about why I want to be in that space so much. And I just walked in there and saw all of these artists doing their work and being empowered to have their own arts practice. And I just thought we need more of this in Tassie, and we need, I sort of started thinking about down the track, I'd like to have a studio space like that in Tasmania. And so, yeah, that was a big thing for me, a really transformative trip.
Yes.
And then I came back to Hobart and just started to look for as many ways I could get into that space. And then eventually finished, another semester, and I finished my degrees. And then I just started looking for ways to do workshops and tutor artists and mentor artists in that space down here. And then eventually worked at a few different disability organisations, and then found Second Echo. So it was, I think it was also part of that process was me just showing up to places and being like just present and being like, I'm really excited. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, no, like, what can I do? And I'm like, I'm going to keep calling until you give me something to do. So like, it was a pushy approach, but it worked. And volunteer for like probably 2 years, I think, in doing lots of workshops and different things. And then I was like, okay, now we probably need to think about how this can be something that is paid, not because I particularly thought I needed that money from that space or to be paid for it. But I started talking to a few other artists, and they were like, what you're actually doing is you're offering your art tutoring and your mentorship, and people are now expecting that they can ask for that for free. So you're setting this sort of example that people don't have to pay artists for their work. And I was like, oh my God, that's not what I wanted to do at all. So then I had to be like, okay, no, I need to be paid to do this now. And so that was a really big wake-up call, because I was just so excited to be in the spaces that I didn't realise what I was sort of doing. Yeah, so that was hard.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be alone in that. I mean, I wrote my book, Creative Work Beyond Precarity, because I had met so many artists whose work is undervalued, you know, and I think there are few people in society, in the economy, actually, it's not a societal thing, it's an economic problem. And so, yeah, I guess coming out of art school, you wouldn't be aware of how much value you offer, and that actually by offering value, you know, actually that there's a worth in that too. You know, it's and it's if people so the book is really about how can we find ways to help people to see how valuable art is in their lives more generally, not just artists or people working in the arts. And so, there's a knock-on effect to that. Is if everyone in the arts and disability sector are doing their work for free and putting on free shows, there's a knock-on effect in, people just start to expect these things happening for free, and unfortunately, it means it's unsustainable.
Yeah,
in so many ways.
Yeah,
the struggling artist is a myth.
We don't have to struggle.
You don't have to struggle. Now Laura Purcell talks about that so well in her episode. Let's get back to painting. Because I mean, we're surrounded by your painting. We're here in your studio, and this is a residency.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about. Before we get into the residency, we really. I can see stuff that isn't on camera, and work in progress, and I'm blown away. Tell us about painting and how, perhaps your process. What's involved?
Yeah, the process has developed since I've sort of had my studio prac at art school finishing in 2018. So my major of painting was finishing in 2018, which was when I got sort of picked up by Despard Gallery, and that's when my practice sort of I started to dedicate like a lot of time to developing that practice and how it was going to be a sustainable process for me to paint work for the gallery and produce work that I was happy to be public. Yeah. That was a big thing, because before that there was sort of lots of painting happening, but stuff that I was just keeping to myself. So that's another interesting thing about when you start painting for an audience, how that sort of changes the process, and how much of yourself you want to sort of show in your work, and what you want to keep a little bit more hidden, I suppose. But the process developed started and has continued to be about childhood wonder and exploring gardens from my childhood, and thinking about that sort of playful approach to discovering all the natural details in our environment, which is just enduring for, my practice. It's still a really big part about how I find like subject matter and look for things to paint. And it's always plants that I keep coming back to. There's such a strong tether to the plants from those childhood gardens and childhood sort of bushland that I used to explore as a kid. And it's sort of transformed now into, remembering those sort of experiences, and then looking for those that feeling to be present in my sort of new environments, but also exploration now. And it's a really sort of a strong feeling when I get into that mindset and I'm looking for things to paint. I get that sort of childhood playful feeling where I'm sort of like running around and looking for things and looking under leaves and that kind of stuff, and with magnifying glasses, and just being just like a bit of a dork, like really excited to find details. And I'm like, oh, that would be so fun to paint. Like I really want to paint that. And then there's that very short time that I have to start a painting before that feeling goes away. So that's a really big part of it, is that I'll find something and I'll be like, okay, I have to start this painting in like 2 days' time, so I can really start that process off with that feeling of being so excited by detail. And it's the subjects and the forms of them, but in particular details and textures and stuff that I sort of look for stuff that I know is going to be challenging to paint, because I really enjoy that process of sort of problem solving, of how to get it to feel really dry or really wet or whatever the texture is, and temperatures as well, trying to make a painting feel warm or cold or sunny or winter light, that kind of stuff. So it's a very like process-led practice, but I don't think it sort of comes across as that in the end, because they sort of end up being very colourful, detailed paintings. But yeah, that process is really driven by my experience as I'm painting. And so, I was saying before that I don't do any preliminary paintings or drawings before I start the work, because it's most exciting when I don't know where it's heading. And I was telling you as well that in my honours project, I was talking about unfolding composition. So we sort of start with one plant or one subject and then add things to that painting that sort of feel that align with the experience that I've had in that place, exploring that environment, but also that I just feel really excited about putting next to something else on the painting and testing that contrast or that harmony on the actual canvas. So I never know what they're going to look like, and I need to not know what they're going to look like so that I feel connected and interested in painting it, because otherwise I think it would feel really boring, and I'd be really sort of just going through the motions of painting the work. And the way I do it now, I'm excited to come into the studio and start a day of painting, because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen today.
No.
I might start painting a completely different plant. And when the process started with the gallery, I was sort of doing a lot of collage in my sort of head as I was painting, and that's how I used to explain it, is that I was doing like real-time collage. So I'd paint one thing and then, I'd start with a group of photos of the plant or in that place or whatever I was painting, from all different angles, and then I would sort of stitch them together as I was painting. So I'd start with one plant and then go to a different photo and add a second plant, and then add the first plant but from behind, all that stuff all on one painting and one sort of picture plane. But then it sort of evolved into doing that while I was painting each plant. So I would sort of start painting one plant and then it would turn into another plant, because I would add like petals from a different photo. And that part was really fun as well, is that the feedback I got was that they looked realistic, and I was like, yeah, but it's not a real plant, because I've made it up, like I've reconstructed it. And that was really fun for me as well, is that I had that sort of creative control over it, or not even control, just the ability to change it based on my experience and how I was feeling with the painting. And they're always intended to have a feeling of that sort of childhood wonder and that sort of fairy enchantment, magical feel to them, which is what I was so interested in as a kid. That was always fairy parties and mermaids and butterflies and all of those things. And I don't want to include any of those actual symbols in the works, but I want them to feel like that kind of feeling, like sort of enchanted forest walks, that kind of stuff, where you feel like there's a bit of energy in the space. And I think now where I'm at currently, I've realised that a lot of that is connected to the lighting of those places, and I'm sort of very obsessed with sort of dappled light at the moment, and thinking about how looking at a space or a garden or anything with that kind of lighting makes it feel really sort of enchanted, or, you know, that sense of wonder that I'm really trying to get across in the work. Yeah.
Yeah, the dappled light. There's a painting behind the camera that is unfinished. You told me. I wouldn't have known, but it reminds me of fishing, and I said this before. But also, it's not fishing here in Tasmania or even Australia. It's like the riverbank where, under a willow tree, my dad teaching me how to fish. You know, it takes me back to that place.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I can understand what you're saying, but I could never do what you do. And you told me, I mean, when you said that these works are unfinished and how many hours you put into them, you know.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you're about a third of the way through. That looks like a finished painting in my eyes.
Yeah.
Very naive and very novice eyes. So, I mean, how long does it take you? And the other thing is, you said you come in for the day, but actually you come in at night.
Yes.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah. Depending on the size, but the medium to larger ones can take up to 200 hours. Sometimes it's less than that, but if I'm really excited about what I'm doing, I kind of want to spend more time on it and sort of draw out that process. But there is like a window of time that I feel connected to the work, and if I pass that window and it closes, I feel almost like irritated. I have to finish this work. So it's a very it's all governed by how connected I feel to the paintings and while I'm doing them. So that part I have sort of in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, we've got to keep moving with this, even though it's really fun to spend time on it. To get it finished, we need to keep working. And yeah, so the time that it takes is so varied, and that those hours like spread out can be, you know, months. If I'm got a deadline, a couple of weeks. It just depends how late I've left the deadline. But while I've been in this studio space, it's been really nice to paint in the day, but I do paint best at night. And those night hours, early hours of the morning, when I sort of finishing up something, when I'm working at home in my home studio before a show, I go down to the studio at like 10 p.m. and just go until sunrise, and that is not particularly healthy or sustainable, but it is when I do feel most productive. So it's been a real balance of trying to still be productive in the space and paint when I'm here, but then also allowing some time for that really like those night hours of painting that I feel really connected and really motivated to work. So like sometimes I'll let myself work in the night because I know it feels good and I'm not going to get distracted by anything.
That was the word you used before. Yeah, I was thinking, you're distraction free. There's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
You can just, because I focus, I mean, I don't know if you used the word focus before the interview. I don't know, so it's your word. Let's use your word, focus. You know, there's an attention to detail. There's and the fact that you're not doing any preliminary sketches and you're really drawing on memory a lot and following a feeling.
Yeah.
And you just become so immersed, I guess.
Definitely, yeah. I think that part of it is what I'm really looking for, and I set up a lot of sort of environmental aspects of the studio to make sure I can get into that immersive state. But it is like I don't feel like I can do anything if I don't have like a minimum of 5 hours, because anything less than that, it feels like I can't get into that flow state.
Okay.
And that focus. Because, like there's this sort of like a warm-up period when I've started painting where I'm still figuring out for that day, figuring out what I'm going to do that day. And then once I get into it, if it's going to be interrupted by something, I feel like I can't commit to getting sort of deep into that process. So there's a really big problem if I have something on in the afternoon or something and I come in the morning, I can't commit to focusing on the work because I know it's going to be interrupted at some point. Yeah. That part is I'm frustrated about how my brain works in that way, because I'm like, you've still got 3.5 hours. You could do a lot of work, but my brain is like, no, we can't sink into it because you'll have to stop at some point. So that's why working at night is so great, because there's no interruptions, but I'm also free to paint as long as I like, as long as I can be awake.
Yeah.
And just keep going if it's working. And that's a really big part of the process that I've talked about before with other people, is like, it's not like a regular job where you go in and you can just do the work. You have to feel in the mood and feel motivated and feel inspired and creative at that time for it to work. So sometimes I get into the studio and I sit here and I'm like, why can't I do anything? I'm so annoyed I can't do anything today. But that's why when I do feel like painting, I have to be like, cancel plans and be like, I can't come and get coffee. I feel like painting and this might not happen for another 4 days. So like I've got to use it while it's here. So that same thing with painting at night is that if I feel like doing it, I'll sort of make a cup of tea and go down and just commit to it, even if it means I end up having 3 hours sleep. It's fine. It's fine. But I don't do it before work. I used to when I had other casual jobs. I'd sort of paint all night and finish at 6 a.m, go to bed for a few hours and get up and go to work, and that seemed to be okay, but not with the work I do now. I need to be focused. It's not like retail. I have to be present in the space, and it's pretty hard to do when you're tired.
Yeah.
But yeah, the night painting I think will be a problem, but also a positive of my practice for the rest of my life. It's just that my brain works best at night.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting that sort of the juxtaposition, or not a juxtaposition, but the fact, you say you have to work to be able to live, pay the rent, put food on the table. But also to be able to paint. But then I guess in the ideal world is if the world really valued art in the way it should be valued, there would be a way for you to be in the studio whenever you want and working as much as you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the ultimate tragedy of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I apply for so many residencies, because it means that for that month or 6 weeks that you're on residency, you can fully commit to your practice. And if you can get that time off work, it just means that you've got a solid amount of time to just wake up, paint, go to sleep, paint, just do that. Get into a routine of committing to it. And there are moments in those residency times as well that you still can't do anything, but you're still in that space and there's no interruptions that are going to pull you out of that mindset. So I think that is why I keep looking for residencies, because I'm sort of like, if I can do that for a month, I can get probably like a work done that I'm really, really satisfied with, but also find out so many things about what's working in the practice during that process, because you're sort of reflecting constantly and there's nothing else getting in the way.
Yeah. And you did tell me, so you've been in this residency for a year at Contemporary Art Tasmania.
Yeah.
How did you get that one?
This one I had applied for something else through Contemporary Arts Tasmania and not gotten it, and then this applications for the studios opened up, and I was like, when you get a rejection letter, I feel like that just motivates me to apply for like 10 other things, because I'm like, okay, I didn't get that one, but what else could I get? And that part is it's kind of addictive, applying for stuff, because you sort of, it's like that what if thing, like this would work really well, I really, really want it, and then if you don't get it, you get that rejection letter, and you can't let that stop you from applying to stuff. So I think it just sort of spurs me on to do more stuff, because I will apply for more stuff. So lots of rejection letters. It happens constantly, but it's part of the process. Had got a rejection, but then applied for this other one. And then I actually didn't get it. Another artist got it, but then they weren't able to do the residency, so I was the next on the list. And they'd contacted me with feedback for my studio proposal, and they were like, gave me lots of feedback. It was really great and really helpful. And then they said, look, you didn't get it, but you're next on the list if someone's going to pull out. And I was like, no one would pull out of this. Like, it's an amazing opportunity. And then someone did. So
wow.
That was really lucky. And I've been, here since December last year. And it'll be finishing up in December this year. And it's been so amazing to have the space to work on the scale of paintings that I was interested in doing, but also to have sort of create a really healthy process of coming to the studio during the day and going home at a reasonable hour. And there's been so many opportunities for conversation and crits and feedback in this space and artist talks. And then this is also where the collaboration started up with Alex Moss. So, lots come out of the residency. And it's just really nice to change the scenery a little bit for a while with your practice and see what happens to your work in a different environment. This has sort of opened up a pretty big space in my brain for this kind of work that I don't think I know I wouldn't have been able to do in my current studio. So It's very exciting. I'll be sad to leave. I love it.
Sure. but then you're an avid applicant of so something will come up.
Yes.
I guess that you talk. I mean, something we talked about before the interview, and you've just mentioned there is just the opportunity. I mean, there's a window and door through to the next artist's space, a studio, and so. I mean, just the chance to be able to get that feedback. But what you were talking about was that, when people leave art school, I never went. When people,
doesn't matter.
But I mean, even engineering school, there's engineering, a lot of labs and things, and I always missed that when just problem solving. So crits and you're getting feedback, but there's problem solving and you're doing it together or whatever. But you were saying before how, when you leave art school, you can go in all sorts of different directions and you don't have that same sort of feel, that group dynamic, so you're getting that when with a residency like this.
Yeah, definitely. And I really miss that part of those conversations that just happen while you're sort of someone's walking by the studio and you say, come in here, can you just give me some feedback quickly? Like I'm doing this thing and I need some help or some advice. And this happens in this space quite a lot, as we sort of grab someone on their way out and you can say, do you have 2 seconds to come and look at this and tell me what you think? That not having that as part of a regular part of the work is, or the working is really I think my practice particularly suffers for that, because I don't have that sort of very regular feedback. But then sometimes it can be good because you just get to focus on what you're doing and just go down a pathway with your practice that that you're really interested in investigating, and no one's going to turn you around and tell you to go a different way. But that sort of that community of artists talking about their work is something that I think everyone who is, a practicing artist should get a chance to be involved in, because it just changes the way you relate to your work, and also it's so healthy and helpful to be looking at other artwork and thinking about what's working and balance and all of those things. It's such an important part of being active in an art space, is that you're also looking at things and you're critiquing other people's work and giving feedback of your own to them. I think we need that to keep moving and to not feel stagnant. So I think that's what's really good about Second Echo, that feedback is a really big part of that space, and being really good audience members is something that we work on a lot and think about a lot. And then also in personal practice, like I just get my friends who are also painters or artists, and I'm like, can you come round to have a look? People in the sort of the arts community that I know, when I'm working in my home studio, I like to prioritise inviting people to come and have a look and give me feedback. And then I've also got really close friends who I send photos to constantly, just like peppering people with photos of like, what do you think about this one? And this is what I've done. And those friends always send their work back. So we have this sort of online conversation happening constantly, especially with a couple of really close friends, where you're sort of sharing work, sort of little thumbnails of your work all the time. But it's not the same as having someone in the real space. We need that for sure. It's really important.
Yeah. No, and I think, you said much earlier about for a long time your work wasn't being shown in public.
Yeah.
And that was a thing for me, was for making photographs all my life, but no one ever saw them.
Yeah.
And but finding being brave, finding the bravery and the confidence to do that, and it was actually by joining a photography group and starting to get that feedback on a regular basis, and learning, actually, this is what artists do.
Yes, yeah. We're all talking about our work constantly. It's so important to be in those spaces, and meeting people who are also making, and to sort of like share the honesty of struggling with your own work. I think that is sometimes not talked enough about, is that, if you are making your work available to the public, they're seeing finished work, and that's great. But there's all these things that happen to get you there, and all of these versions of the work as it's getting made, that no one gets to see. And I really like seeing works in progress, because you might be able to see where an artist is going with their work, but you also, when you do see that final work, you know how much has happened to get them there. Yeah. I find that really interesting, and I think that we need that sort of that perspective of making art, is that like it doesn't just happen, and there are a lot of mistakes on the way that make the work finished, or resolved, or not resolved at all. That might be the point of it, but yeah, I think that being in those community spaces and sharing your work, and like you said, being brave to share your work, even if it is unfinished or unresolved. That's really it's important to keep doing that, so that we continue to show our work to people, because it is easy to do a work, and if you don't like it, to paint over it, or to get rid of it, or throw it away, or hide it forever. But I think some of the most interesting conversations come out of showing the works that you really don't like, and asking people, to give you that feedback that is, probably going to feel quite scary, to be like, this is a painting or an artwork that I know is not working at all. But not saying that, just saying, can I get your feedback? And people can confirm what you've felt about the work, or they might give you completely different reasons why it's not working, which is really interesting. I think that's all worth it. And with art school, like that's happening all the time because your work is always in, half finished or whatever, and people are seeing it, and open plan studios, they can always see your work. And that's sometimes something that I really struggle with, is that I'm sort of can be quite private about my work sometimes before I feel I'm happy to show it to people, but I need to consciously remind myself that that's I'm missing opportunities by doing that. Being brave, show your work.
Well, it's an incredibly vulnerable position, particularly when you're putting so much of yourself into your work. And look, it's whatever your practice is, and finding, I guess, community is the word you've used there, but trust is important, and feeling safe in sharing.
And you're going to get a group of people who are open-minded to your work, and to give feedback that isn't just, I don't like it. Like, that doesn't help. Great. That's the feedback you get from gallery audiences, is that that happens all the time. People are like, I don't like your work. And I'm like, oh, cool, I can't do much with that right now. So I always say, why don't you like it? Can you tell me? And that was a really interesting part about starting up with Death by Gallery, is that when I started showing work there, I got offered a job as gallery assistant. So sometimes I would not tell people that I was the artist, just see what they were going to say, because I was like, I want the honest feedback. And some of it was brutal. Wow. But it was good, because I was like, people are always going to your face be like, oh, it's beautiful. And it's like, thank you so much for saying that. But I also would love to hear why it might not be finished or whatever. Like, you can also say that, and people are scared to do that. So I think that's also a good thing about the community sort of engagement with feedback, is that you also get brave in saying to someone, this is not with my eyes, particularly sitting well with me, and my viewing experience is that my eye goes straight to this part, and maybe you don't want that. Even just providing feedback by explaining your viewing experience can really help the artist to sort of decide if they want that, or if it's not at all what they're after, and what changes they might need to make it better, or to improve the viewing experience, if that's what they would like to do. Maybe they want that audience to feel like it's uncomfortable, or there's sort of tension in the work. It's always helpful to show someone something and be like, just tell me what your first, what your eye direction is doing, like where is your, if it's a visual art piece, like where is your attention settling when you're looking at the work, because that might not be what you're after, so you need to adjust the work, or be okay with it.
That is a red hot tip.
Yeah, I like to ask people that, and I also, when I provide feedback, usually that's the first thing I say. I say, this is what's happening in my experience when I look at the work. So I'll be like, my eye goes here and then it comes up here in this motion, or I can't quite see past this shape or this colour. That's really drawing my attention, and my attention is staying in that one place for a longer period of time. That kind of stuff is really, I think, some artists might not want to hear that, but that's normally my approach to feedback, is to start off with, this is what happened when I looked at the work.
Well, that's it. I suppose if you're speaking to people who can't express what it is immediately, to give them a few pointers, a little bit of a guideline to tease it out of them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that at Second Echo yesterday, where we had rehearsals and feedback constantly throughout the day, and there was something that I'd been noticing, but it was subconscious. But it was by the end of the morning, it suddenly became clear. Oh, actually, everybody is moving in this direction and towards the audience, and okay. And then I thought, okay, now I've got the words for that.
Yes, yeah.
And it was not prompting, or probing, but it was just this sort of, just having enough of a dialogue to tease it out.
Yeah, that's the part I think that we sort of, it means if we're practicing that quite often, you get more comfortable with sort of your first responses, just sort of like come out if you're asked to provide feedback. But if you don't practice that, or that doesn't happen very often, it feels really foreign to think like, oh, I do have feelings about this work and I do have observations, but I don't know how to explain it. Like, and that's also something that you can say. You can be like, something feels like off, or something feels clunky, or something like that, and I can't figure out what it is. But even that is valuable feedback, so that the people, like the artist or the creatives, can be like, okay, we don't want it to feel clunky, so let's work on that. So that it's a good thing to practice.
It is, and it's something that you can apply to all walks of life. Something that just came up for me right then was sort of, with social media and looking at imagery or listening to things, watching a thing, it's almost sort of like dislike, like dislike, like dislike, dislike.
Yeah.
And and so there's perhaps a habit developing there for so many of us, me included, that perhaps is a little bit counter or a lot counter to what you've just described, is that actually to be able to spend time together and feel comfortable having a dialogue about a piece of work, because everyone's going to benefit from that in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's just also like times I go to exhibitions and I'll go around and there'll be works that I like, and I'll be like, I like this. And then I'll try and actively think about why I like it. Like, what is it that is drawing me to that work, and why do I feel, that it has given me a nice experience. And the same with disliking the work. I can't just walk around and be like, I don't like that, because it doesn't. And sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm just like, I just don't like it, and I couldn't tell you why. I just don't feel connected to that work at all. But it's always good just to practice in your own head, like, oh, initially I felt, no, I don't like this. And then you might look at it a bit longer and ask yourself why, like what's bothering you about the work, or what do you not feel engaged by? And then through that sort of internal conversation, you can figure out what kind of elements of successful work you really like and you might want to incorporate in your own practice, or you think about when you are giving feedback to other people. Like if you see a really successful work and then you say, oh, this is why I think it's really great, then you can see when that might not be happening in someone else's work and be like, oh, I saw this work the other day and this is what I really loved about it, and then this might be helpful for improving your offering of your work. And it's also like giving feedback is also to be aware that the artist can completely reject your feedback. I think that's also something that isn't practiced enough in art school, is that like teachers will provide a lot of feedback and they're not always so open to the students being like, I don't want to do that and I don't feel like that's going to be good. And then they sort of think, oh, you're resisting my advice. And it's just like, well, you can. You can totally resist feedback and advice. I think it's just about being open to receiving it in the first place, and then you can decide. But it doesn't help when you are, getting feedback from a group or one person and you are already very resistant to what they're going to say.
No.
That doesn't lead anywhere.
Well, I assume part of the regular crits at school, the process of that just repeatedly is to help students to feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And those who just can't break down that resistance, they must, they probably need something else to be able to help with that, or it's never going to be right for them.
Yeah, I think that it's something that we're like, they talk about like real world outside of art school. Is that you will encounter people not liking your work if you continue to make artwork out of art school. You're not going to get the feedback that is as considered as the feedback from other artists, if that sort of makes sense.
It does,
the best feedback that you'll get is from other artists because they're thinking about process and form and context and concept and all of those things. The feedback from audiences that aren't artists is sometimes really hard to accept because it's not rooted in any sort of understanding of art. Sometimes they'll just be like, I had some feedback for
excuse me.
Had feedback from a painting I had at Despard Gallery, which was this audience member or gallery visitor was just really angry that I had painted rhododendrons because they were an invasive species, and she was just like really upset about it. And I was like, I'm sorry. But she was like, I hate it. I hate the work because it's rhododendrons. And I was like, okay, is there anything about the painting that you might like form-wise? And she was just like, no, I hate it. I hate it. So that sort of feedback is really sometimes a little bit confusing because it's not based in an understanding of art. So the best thing we can do is, I suppose, expose our work to so many different audiences that you're getting all this sort of feedback, but also really valuing feedback from other artists because it's going to be helpful.
Yeah, and I think being able to acknowledge and understand that particular person, clearly has there's a reason that they haven't revealed, but to accept that that's their stuff.
Yeah.
And that it's not your, you're not going to get another 100 people saying, I hate it because you've got invasive species.
Yeah.
That's a one-off. It's their stuff. For them to work out for themselves if they choose. Yeah,
it did open my sort of mind a little bit to how I hadn't really considered that flowers or plants could be offensive, and that was helpful to think about. I was like, maybe I need to be more conscious of what I choose, or not that it would affect the choice of plants that I would use, but just to be aware that some choices might be taken in a certain way, and it wouldn't change what I would choose to paint and why I would paint it, but just to be aware that that's even a thing, because I was really surprised that it was so upsetting and I hadn't thought of that before. So it is always, everything has a, if you want to take it on board as feedback in general, it can have a place, but it doesn't mean you have to change anything about your practice. It's just good to hear what people feel when they look at a work, and that's usually what I'm trying to do, is to create a feeling in the works, like the paintings that I do, and it doesn't have to match the feeling that I am drawing from as I'm making the work. But if anyone comes back and has like a sensory or emotional reaction to the work, I'm like, this is great. This is what I was trying to get. Like, I really want that. And that means that you have to be open to all of the emotional or sensory responses that people have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Josh Foley talked about this in Josh's episode. He painted his car, and he has bits of lumps of epoxy, and I mean they're sculpted, and it's striking. You can't miss it. But yeah, he said there are people who are really quite offended that he drives down their street.
Yes, yeah,
and he loves it.
Yes,
but I mean, not every artist wants to be controversial, nor should they need to be. But it's. Yeah, as you say, I think the way you've described it, Maggie, is beautiful in that, you want to invoke emotion, and you have to be open to a range. And that's a wonderful thing. There's something that sort of I really want to come back to just before we press record. You were talking to me about the what is an emerging artist? So you say you're an emerging artist, and then you were sort of saying that there are different perceptions of what that is, and I think it ties into what you've just been telling us in that these are the sorts of things that emerging artists go through. How leaving art school or putting first putting your work out into the world and then getting feedback and you used the word success before as well, and it is this sort of question of you to sort of root it in your practice. What I understand of it, you follow a feeling, you evoke emotion through the work that you produce in this really extensive process. And you carry on making, you keep applying for residencies, you make the time and space to do this work, you get represented by a gallery, you have residencies. I think I just said that. But it's this, you're constantly evolving your practice. And as so how do you feel about this moniker of the emerging artist? And when will you no longer be an emerging artist? There you go. There's the question.
The question, and it's so. I have no idea,
No.
And I think we're all a little bit unsure of that, and we kind of. I'm always sort of looking for someone to tell me when that will be, if that will be. I mean, I might be emerging forever. I don't know.
I am, by the way.
It's just.
Yeah, in everything in life.
Yeah.
I
mean, if it's defined by if you're still learning and figuring it out, then I don't think that will ever stop. So emerging forever. Some people do define it as in very sort of timeline based sort of descriptions of I think it was 5 years after your first solo exhibition, or it's a certain amount of time passed since you left uni. I think it's the Tasmania, the Women's Art Prize Tasmania. When you apply for that, they have a section where you can elect that you're an emerging artist. And they have a few descriptions in there, but then they say it's up to you whether you still consider yourself an emerging artist. So if that is the case and we get to decide, I don't know if I would ever feel like I have reached mid-career or anything beyond, which I can't even think about because that's established artist seems way in the not even actually on my mind because I'm still a little bit unsure of what's happening. And when I was asked to have, so I had my work up in the grad show for 2018, the end of my major of painting. So not the end of my degree. I hadn't graduated yet. I still had electives and things to do. But that was when Stephen Joyce from Despard Gallery saw my work in the grad show and asked if I would be part of the summer show that was coming up, which is how that you sort of enter the space as the Despard Gallery space as an emerging artist. And I remember exactly where I was when I read the email from Stephen, and I called him in 2.5 minutes since he sent the email because I just saw it come up and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, it's a gallery. And my art teacher, Yvette Watt, was talking to me about installing the grad show. And they said, they were like, what will you do if you get asked to be represented by a gallery? And I was like, oh, don't be ridiculous. I was like, don't be silly. That's not going to happen. And then, I didn't even realise that there were galleries coming around to look at the work. I didn't know that was a thing. So I was extremely shocked but extremely excited. And I rang Stephen and was, just about crying in the car because I was just so excited. And then they were like, do you want to come into the gallery? And I was like, whenever you'd like me to, like, just tell me when it is. Like, I was too enthusiastic. And they said that. Well, they didn't say that later, but they were just like, yeah, we could tell you were like very keen. And I was like, well, yeah, this is like the dream of a gallery wanting to show your work. And so that was very fun, but also scary and big for me. But so I've been represented by them since 2018. I think the emerging artist thing is also tied up in if you are moving forward in your career as an artist and you are getting recognition or showing your work multiple times to the public, if you do still call yourself an emerging artist, does that mean you take space away from other emerging artists at the beginning? So I think about that sometimes in terms of like applying for emerging art prizes and stuff. And we've got Henry Jones Emerging Art Prize coming up, which I would like to apply for, but I kind of think that it might be the last year that I can apply for it, because even though I still feel like I'm emerging and I'm not anywhere near leaving that space, applying for things like that might mean that I, take up space from, students who are just coming out of art school or something like that. So I think it's like being emerging, but like consciously being emerging, so that you recognise that you are not at the starting point anymore, but that you still feel like you're not at the end of emerging either. Like it's really hard to think about, but I think about it a lot, and I think about it in terms of how someone who hasn't had public shows or something like that might look at someone like me who has had 2 solo shows and group shows and stuff, and they might think, oh, that's, why are they applying for this emerging art prize? Because they have, been, somewhat successful in the art space. So, I think that it's a judgment call of your own, and it is based on where you feel you are. But I think you also have to be honest with yourself as well about, that if you have achieved some stuff, it's okay to be like, I have done some things.
Yeah,
because I feel very, very still shy and very. I want to be very humble about all of the amazing opportunities. And I don't think it's I don't want it to be part of my presentation of my work that I'm like, oh, look at these things. It's not, I don't like that at all.
There is none of that, Maggie. You use the word humble. I mean, you are so considerate of others. Yeah, you're always thinking of others, and that's a gift. And look, I think you've just raised something I hadn't thought of, is about how to consider others. Because, it's go back to this idea of we're all evolving in our practice, and there's always someone coming through. And and that's why those art prizes will try to categorise. Categorisation I have a problem with.
Me too.
Generally speaking in life, but there's a good reason for it in those sort of circumstances.
Yeah, it does help you sort of define who you're up against, I guess. I mean, if you're thinking about entering into something and the thought of being sort of judged alongside someone who has, 25 years of gallery representation or something like that, it sort of seems like, oh, well, I won't even bother because, but then at the same time, I think that it would be so nice if we could all feel a little bit less pressured to define our sort of practice as reaching a certain level of success, and then something meaning something like, you sort of, that there are like universal milestones, where I don't actually think that there are. In each practice is completely different, and the trajectory is going to be very different. Speed of, practice development will be totally different. So that's I have so many questions about prizes and those sort of opportunities. It's sort of like it's great to enter into them, and exposure and all of those things, but then I'm sort of like, but it's also kind of like, I don't know if we should all be lining up all the paintings and being like, this one's the best one and this one's the worst one. Like that feels really, because you're just getting a snapshot of that person's whole practice. And yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a sort of bigger conversation with a lot of...
It is. It keeps coming up on the podcast.
Yeah.
And for me, having spent time with artists mostly in the UK but elsewhere in the world, it's very much an Australian thing, this idea of the art prize. I mean, there are art prizes in all corners of the world, but there's something about the culture of the arts here in Australia that and I haven't really got a handle on it yet, so that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued by it, and I'm not engaged in that myself. But look, it's anyway. I'm in danger of going political. I suppose that's
okay.
what I'm trying to segue.
That's okay. We can pivot away from that if you like.
Look, no, but Maggie, I mean, there's so much in that for all of us who are listening. I think for us to think about our own practices and how we want to engage with, whether it's arts prizes or just be part of communities and communities practice or whatever. But it's this thing of, I think, you've given us a few red hot tips there about just how to be in these spaces, to be with others, and to be considerate of others as well in that. Look, we did tease the PhD. It's something so I always end with what's next, where are you going? So perhaps where's your painting going, and then you also, but I mean your work, and the PhD is a consideration around again evolving your working practice.
So painting wise, I've got my next solo show at Despard Gallery August, September next year, 2025. And so that sort of set up as you sort of have a solo show every 2 years, and then there's group show opportunities in between. But so my last solo was 2023 October, I think. No, I don't know. Can't remember. So my next one's coming up. So I'm working on work for that at the moment. And so that will take up the next sort of period of painting. These works around here will be in that show, which is really exciting. And then, just with opportunities for local residencies and stuff. I've got one in Queenstown coming up in November. And then for my working practice, I'm really excited about hopefully doing a PhD.
We've stopped recording now. But do you know what?
Did we use it all up?
This is great. So the cameras are still recording.
Oh, okay.
So sorry to interrupt you, Maggie. Sorry, audience. The audio's run out. So this is definitely you're the record holder.
Oh, really?
For the longest podcast. But look,
I did tell you I was going to talk a lot.
This is great. I love to listen. So Maggie, sorry. So please carry on.
I was just wanting to do a PhD eventually. That's sort of in my on my list of things I'd really like to do, and investigating really positive and successful ways of empowering artists to make their work artists with disabilities, but also just anyone in general who wants to tell their stories through making art. So I think the PhD, I would like it to be sort of the intersection between art and health, I suppose, or sort of positive psychology of like ways that really good things that we can do to continue engaging with our own practice, but also in the community with other people, collaborating and all of the beautiful things that Second Echo really sort of champions in that space. And so the PhD, I think I haven't figured out how I will sort of pitch it, but I think I would love it to be an evolving research project that sort of looks at really good ways to support artists, but also I imagine that there would have to be some sort of personal inclusion of how these beautiful artists inspire me to continue developing my practice. So there is that crossover of the sides of my practice that they sort of meet in the middle and feed into one another, but I'm really interested in how working in that space with those artists has sort of influenced my own work, and it definitely has. It's made me feel a lot more willing to be more honest in my work and more like unapologetic with my ideas and creativity, and so that part is really important. So I'm not sure how that will come together as research, but you know, a lot of the advice has been that I should go to do this research in sort of countries and studios and spaces that have done this really well and have been doing it really well for a long time. But one of the really important things about doing the research is that I want it to be based on Tasmanian artists. So I want it to be about this community and this space and how we are making artwork in this tiny corner of the world. So maybe it will include some travel to other studio spaces, but I want the research to genuinely be about Tasmanian population. So that will hopefully happen at some point. We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah. No, look, there is something special about this little island of ours.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can call it mine yet. I've only been here 4 years, but this island of yours.
Yeah. You can. It's like an emerging artist thing. You decide when you're a local.
I think I just did.
Yes, that's good. Happy to have you.
Yeah, my dog's Tasmanian. He was born and bred here.
Oh well, there you go. Definitely, the family is now Tasmanian.
Oh, look, Maggie, thanks so much. Where can people find you? Instagram or?
Yeah, my Instagram is Maggie Jeffries, and I've got my photo on Instagram is me as a kid wearing a tiara, like laughing. So it's not a painting, and it should be, but I just can't take it down. I just love that's what people looking for me as an artist, and then there's that face, me as a kid with a very funny haircut. So that's me on Instagram, and then I've got my artist page on Despard Gallery website as well. And yeah, I think that's probably it for now. I need to develop a website and all of these things, but you know, that part of it, like the admin all the admin that I need to do is not as interesting as actually painting.
That's a sign of a successful artist, you see. So
Yeah,
when they have someone who can do all that stuff for them.
Yeah.
But then do we really want that? Yeah. No. Look, Maggie, that's enough. We Instagram. I mean, you know, Instagram is the place to go. Despard. Well, I'll make sure there are links to you and to Despard in the show notes. And I just say thank you so much. It's been such a joy.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is great. It was so lovely, and we talked so fast and briefly at Second Echo that I was just like, this is going to be a fun conversation. And I did tell you that I would just keep running until you told me to stop talking. So that's good. I'll stop now. Thank you. so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Connect, Curate, Create.
I hope you found inspiration and insights that you can apply to your own creative work. For highlights and links, check out the show notes, and be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast player so you never miss an episode. Tune in next time as I continue to explore life and work in the arts.